Hi, everybody. This is an important part in my journey in the Attitude Makeover show. This is episode 12, 12 of them. Not bad, huh? Today I'm joined by Andaleeb Wajid, the queen of breezy reads, who writes constantly, consistently, and wonderfully well. She has been writing from the heart for over a decade now, and her novels span across multiple genres from young adult to romance to sci-fi and horror. A rebel searching for her cause, she never felt herself fitting into the restrictive molds of society, and writing became her solace and way of expression. In this conversation, she talks about full-time writing, hits and misses with self-publication, the economics and future relevances of traditional books, and her offbeat ambition. If you are looking to take a plunge into the passion economy, listen to this engaging conversation for some much needed nuggets of wisdom. Again, as usual, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you so much, Andaleeb. I know it's been a rainy morning, a very wet day in Bangalore, and through the traffic and mess, you've made time to be part of my show. It's my privilege to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I was telling you, I was just looking for an excuse to get out of the house, so it's great to be here.
No, and for me, I think as I was going through your journey, you sort of, in a lot of ways, symbolize what Attitude Makeover is really about. The show is called Attitude Makeover. It's about discovering yourself and the journey one takes through in this process. And you, in a lot of ways, are what Attitude Makeover is all about. And so, thank you so much. It's a privilege to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk about myself. So, not a problem.
So we'll start off with the beginning, the journey. You grew up, like me, in a middle-class family in Bangalore with a set of expectations, which is slightly different from mine, of course, like we discussed. But still, there are expectations growing up. And then you got married. You started off with a notional thing that there's no career. Right.
I did have that sort of, ingrained into me from the time I was a little, I think, a very adolescent that, there would be no career. It's the house, the family. That's what you have to look for in your life. And there was a part of me that rebelled against it. And I was like, no, I'm kind of made for bigger things. I don't have any problem with the, being, I don't think I've ever fit into the mold of a housewife. And I've also found it very restricting. So I've always felt that I was like, there's a little more to me than that. And I didn't know what it was. So I think until I found that, it was a bit of a, I wouldn't say struggle, but it took some time to figure out what it was.
If I draw an analogy to books or novels, you see, there's always an inciting incident for a great novel. What was, and in a lot of ways, your books, it seems like a real life protagonist journey in some way. Tell me, what's that journey like? From like blogging to tech writing to short stories to the current form of who you are and the brand that you are. What's that journey like?
So there was an inciting incident, actually, which is a bit whimsical if you say, very long ago. I remember sitting at my father had a business in Hong Kong, and we would go there and spend our vacations there because there was a house, an apartment. And, it was a work from home situation back then. The office was a one-room office, part of the apartment. And I think once I sneaked in when he wasn't there, I sat at the desk. I was around 6 or 7, I think. And I just, it was a revolving chair. So I kind of just went around in circles, and that I had this feeling. I remember this kind of quite clearly. There was a desk, there was a chair, and I was dizzy, but I kind of had this smallish sort of epiphany that I want to be a writer, because I kind of love desks. I thought, that if I was a writer, I would get a desk. So I wanted to be a writer. So that was back then. It kind of obviously changed as I grew, and you had that usual thing where you think that, okay, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be an air hostess, of all things. And it kind of just went going up and down. And then my father passed away when I was 12, and it kind of changed a lot of things in my family, in my house. And I had to kind of realign my priorities, and what I wanted to do, as opposed to the expectations of the family, which were for me to get a basic education. And I think I picked up stuff along the way, and even then it wasn't like a defined thing. So what I had, the epiphany at 6 years old, didn't strike me until I was like, I think at least around 14 years later, when I was married. I got married early, and I was pregnant at 20. So I think I was bored then. Everyone had finished college, and all my friends had jobs, they had careers, they had places they were going to, things they were doing, and I was feeling definitely left out of this entire new culture. So all along, everyone was moving in the same step, like, school, and then junior college, and then college, whatever. And now everyone had moved on, and I kind of felt I was still behind, way behind. And there wasn't much I could do, since I was expecting. And so I kind of turned to writing, because it was what I used to do whenever I needed to express something. So it kind of took the form of stories, which I eventually forgot about the stories. I sent off one actually to Open Sesame, which used to be a supplement of Deccan Herald, and I forgot about it. And when my son was born, huge, there's no other word that describes it better than hangama, because it was very chaotic, and he was in the NICU for 21 days, and I completely forgot about the story I sent, until one of my uncles came and said, your story got published. So, it kind of took, at the same time as my son was born, I think my first story got published in the paper then. And it, despite being a mother to a very, I wouldn't say frail, but, there was a lot of problems since he was in the NICU and all that. Despite that, I would take time to sit and maybe write a story and send it off. And I think it took me 6 months till, when he was around 6-7 months. And it kind of slowly, grew into something. But then, like I was telling you, this is not a job. Writing stories is not a job. And, I was very unqualified by then. By the time I realized that I wanted to try my hand at getting a job, I was already behind my peers. At least 4 or 5 years behind. And I kind of, my family was very, it might seem odd to you, when I say they were open-minded, and they said, no, go ahead, get a job if you want, and, try it and see if that's really what you want to do. And whatever places I applied to, they were very disdainful of me, saying, because I didn't have any work experience, I just had these stories. And I was like, feeling quite, was feeling very like, oh God, there's never going to be a job for me. I'm never going to work anywhere. But it happened. Someone was looking for a fresher. They didn't mind that I was, in my mid-20s as opposed to early 20s then. So I got a job, and I learned on the job. And I quickly learned that technical writing was not my cup of tea. I have, it feels now like a very different world. It feels like that life was lived by someone else, because it was a long time ago. And at the same time, it has no bearing to my life at all right now. But, so I enjoyed it, but but for the money, whatever little money, since I was making money for myself for the first time. And it felt incredibly empowering. It felt really good. And so, I kind of liked being independent. And I had to kind of decide whether I liked the money or whether I liked writing my stories more.
So that was very early on, you had to take that decision?
Yeah, I was writing my first novel when I took my first job. And I didn't know much about writing, as it were. It was all fits and starts. I would write. I didn't know the mechanics of writing. I didn't know what a plot was. I was just writing very instinctively, And so that story is very raw and it has a very unfinished, unpolished feel to it. But at the same time, I kind of felt that it took me over fits and starts to finish that book. It took me 2 years. I mean, now when I think of it, it's ridiculous.
Considering my next question was around the pace, and it seems to be a roller coaster ride you're on.
Yeah, I mean, in 2 years, I will probably, if I were allowed to not do anything else, I would probably write, and I'm not just throwing this number into the air, I would probably happily write 20 books, But 2 years to write one book, and it was a defining moment for me. And then I kind of got into, the realization that finding a publisher was not going to be easy because, again, it was a very different time. We didn't have publishers, didn't have websites. They didn't have, there were no submission IDs. Things are much easier now. You can reach out to...
Are these the 2000s or the 90s? Late
2000s,
okay.
Yeah. Not like late 90s, I was still finishing college and, just got married and all that. So this is the mid 2000s.
Okay.
So, very few publishers had email addresses and, you either had to figure out how, and they all lived, so all the publishers are based out of Delhi, Noida now, Gurgaon. And back then it was Delhi. And you had to find a way to get your manuscript to them, not like today where you send an email or you can send a DM on Twitter or reach out to someone on Instagram because you know who the people are. Back then it was this very hazy world where, you were trying to break through, but you didn't know anyone. And it was, I think, a lot of hits and misses. And imagine taking a printout of 200 pages of your book and then couriering it to Delhi and not knowing whether it even reached them or not. And I did that for a couple of publishers. And most of the publishers whom I emailed to rejected the book. I mean, I'm sure they had their reasons, but it was very disheartening. And it was, I remember, I think my brother telling me, you should write something else. But that thought was terrifying. I mean, I've written this book, which stands at something like 80,000 to 1 lakh words, I think. And I have no idea if it's any good. My friends are telling me it's good, but then they're my friends. They will say that. I need validation from an editor who says it's good, and only when it's published, I'll know whether I should write something more. So there was nothing apart from that. And finally, I did manage to get it published, but from a very small, very non-notable publisher. And it was not the best experience, but it kind of gave me an opening.
Yeah.
And seeing my book published made me like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do in my life. And I quit my jobs. By then, I had switched 2 or 3 jobs by then. The last one I quit because it felt like a weight on my shoulder, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to go there, but this job is holding me back and I can't stay with it. So I'm quitting. And I quit it. And this was 2009 when my first book came out. And I quit it. And then I very quickly realized that writing brings no money at all, So, I struggled through it in the sense of personal finances, independence. Since I was now used to being independent and now suddenly I had no income. I kind of tried to find my way, tried to write. So I ended up writing more books once I didn't have a job. And the books started getting published.
So is there a discipline to it? Let me go back. One of the things I noticed is you've written close to 26 plus and counting books. And during this, you've picked various genres as well.
Yeah.
Whether it is young adult to romance to sci-fi and even horror. Right?
Yes.
And I think it's a common notion out there for the non-writer world that writing is like a very time-intensive process. But here you are on a pace which is like,
It is time intensive.
so there probably is a discipline or a model that you figure out for yourself.
It's not for everyone though, because, writing full time is a privilege. It's not someone, I quickly realized this, I tried to write full time and then I also wanted money. And since writing wasn't giving it to me, I kind of, went back into a corporate job in 2014. And I kind of stuck around there for a year and a half.
How many books had you finished by then?
So 2014 was my year of taking a break because I had finished 10 books then.
Oh, you finished 10 books and then went back to the corporate world?
Yeah.
Because
I thought, okay, I've written 10. Let's take a break for now. And I told myself I'm not writing anything this year. This year, when this year ends, I'm going to write. So the moment 2015, Jan 1st, I started writing. I said, I can't take any more of not writing. It's driving me mad, So writing happened, the work happened at the same time. But I realized that I was just not as impassioned about the, whole corporate setup. I didn't feel that way about I really couldn't be that deeply bothered about what was happening and, over there. And I think that's a problem with me, as in I really don't think I can fit into a corporate world, corporate job sort of thing because of that. Because you have to feel deeply about something, to do well at it.
Yeah, and you by then I think you had already figured this is your passion.
Yeah.
I think once you figure that, then it becomes even more difficult.
Yeah, and I did know that again I'm going to have that same problem of writing not paying me enough. But I said, let me handle it this time. Let me figure it out, So I quit my job again and went back to writing. And it's, I think until 2019, when I didn't rediscover self-publishing. I'm saying rediscover because I did self-publish on Amazon KDP. I took the rights of my first novel back from the publisher in 2012 and I self-published it on Amazon. But there was no guidance. I didn't know what we were supposed to do. And there was a small thing which I missed out on, which was, the tax information. The moment I see something which is little beyond me, I can't do this. So I left that empty.
The finance part of it.
As a result of which I never got paid. And I thought this is a scam. Self-publishing is a scam. I can't do this. So I kind of let it go. And then in 2019, I went back to it. And I realized the mistake I had done. It was just my PAN number. I just had to put my PAN number. But it wasn't like that book had earned a lot. There is a process to self-publishing, and you have to kind of come to, have to be at peace with it. So,
were you also during this period building a fan base, building an audience? Did you identify, because your genre is changing, and so I would think your audience and the age groups or the likes of the changes.
Consciously I didn't set out to do it. To be very honest, not consciously, because I really want to enjoy what I'm writing personally. When I'm writing, I seldom think about the writer. The reader. I'm writing, so I want to enjoy it. So it's a very self-indulgent exercise for me, and I wanted to be paid for that. So
has that perspective changed over the years, or it's still I'm writing for myself?
I think that perspective was not that clearly defined. I was much more humble before. So I was, I think that perspective was very shadowy. It was not very clearly defined. But there were things that I can't write about this, I can't write about that, I don't want to write about, explicit things in my romances. But all that changed eventually. It kind of took a lot of, I think a lot of these changes happened. So you were asking about a fan base. I did have a fan base, but I also feel that once I started self-publishing, it has grown. It has kind of become wider. The fan base that I had earlier was much more limited, much more smaller. Because publishers would bring out one book or two books a year. So, but when I started self-publishing and started bringing out books faster, and basically, there are a lot of writers out there. So I'm just one of them, but at the same time, there is something different in what I offer. So because of that, I think my reader base, I wouldn't say fan base, but reader base has expanded. And I should hope so that it positively affects the books that I've published traditionally also, because readers who want, I remember trying to deal with a reader so I publish books on Amazon under this thing where the books are available for free to those who have subscribed to Kindle Unlimited. It's like a Netflix subscription, So the Kindle Unlimited subscription lets people read books for free, which are under that banner. So the readers are used to reading the books for free. I get paid. It's not like, I get pretty decently paid. I wouldn't say pretty decently, but anyway. So I had to deal with a reader who wanted to know why my new book with Penguin wasn't on Kindle Unlimited. She's like, why isn't it on Kindle Unlimited? I said, it can't be unless the publisher decides to put it on. They also can, So, but at the same time, I also realized that if she really does want to read it, she might eventually buy it, I've had that experience with a lot of readers who were used to reading the books that I've been publishing. Now going back to my traditional books, trying to, so they're going and checking out what else I've written. So it's helped in letting more people know that I write.
So there seems to be a journey you've gone through in the last 15, 17 years, wherein you've discovered not just about the style of writing and, the genres and the storytelling part of it. It's also about the book publishing industry.
Yes.
The experience around it. When do I go with a publisher? When do I pick a self-publishing model over here? For someone who's actually venturing into writing, what's the advice? When do you go into this route versus that route?
So it actually depends on what you want to do with your writing, what your goal is. As a writer, if you want people to pick up your books, say at an airport or at a bookstore, and you want to feel that moment of glory, then self-publishing isn't for you. Because your books will not be available in airports. It's not even about the distribution. Amazon doesn't bring out paperbacks. We can bring out only ebooks. We can tie up with other sites like Notion Press and bring out paperbacks. But again, the availability will be limited to online stores. So it's just not the same thing. If you want to be a writer, to have your book out in the world for people to pick it up, for it to be reviewed in magazines and newspapers, then you should definitely wait for the traditional publishing thing. It's much easier than what it used to be back when I started, and there are a lot more publishers also today as compared to earlier. I would definitely say for a newcomer, they should wait and get published traditionally. Because there is also, sadly, a sort of mindset in the industry about self-published authors, because there is no gatekeeper. There is no editor, unless you hire one yourself, and you do all that stuff. There is definitely, I would say, a sort of change in quality, and I try to make sure. So the thing is that people think that because I write so much and so fast, they think that I just write anything and publish it. But that's not the case. I mean, I take a lot of pain to make sure, a lot of that my books, I wouldn't say they're perfect at all or anything, but as much as I can, manage. And they're not like, say, 20,000 or 30,000 word stories. They each go into 65,000 words, which is quite a lot if you think about it. So, I think anyone who wants to be a writer should be prepared for whether they self-publish, or whether they do it traditionally. They have to be prepared for hard work and patience. Because it sounds absolutely boring when I say hard work and patience, but those are the two things. Because traditional publishers take their time in getting back to you. There is a team. It's a collaborative effort. Bringing out a book for them is a collaborative effort. Self-publishing, you're on your own. You are the one who makes all the decisions. You're the one with the finger on the button. And, you hit publish and that's it. But when you publish traditionally, there are various people who, see the book. So many things are picked up and, discarded or added. So many different layers to it. At the same time, traditional, for someone like me who writes a lot and who has readers who are waiting for books from me, self-publishing turned out to be a sort of way for me to make it happen, to write as much as I wanted to publish as much as I wanted to, and to also get paid for it. So, so since you mentioned discipline earlier on, I treat my writing as a job, so I sit down in the morning and I try and get in this much before. These days it's not as structured, but it was pretty well structured. A few months ago, it was very well structured. And I would start, so I love making plans and making lists. So all that, it used to fall into place. So I think there is a sort of, if you have a discipline in place, it kind of...
So I want to go more deeper into this bit of writing itself, right from the discipline. It starts with, and this is enormous, asking you a whole bunch of questions around writing. So it always starts with, it's a journey from an idea to a draft. So it starts with, first, do I continue with a genre? Do I get deeper into a genre, or no, I'm done with this genre, or maybe I want to try this genre? Is that where it starts for you from a writing perspective?
So I think that's a sort of decision I've started making more recently. So earlier I would take an idea and I would run with it and see where it goes. So there were times when, if I was writing a romance and I was sick of it, I was very tempted to make the two protagonists turn on each other and kill each other, because sometimes, you get bored of writing the same genre, the same... writing romance novels, and I'm a very cynical person, in a sense. The romance in romance novels is fun for me to read and write, but it's very different in the real life. So there are times when I like writing other genres, like exploring other genres, especially horror. I find it much more gritty, much more oddly much more real. So I never used to make those decisions before starting, but now I do, because a lot of thought goes into planning the story, into plotting it, into developing the characters. I can't do this if the genre isn't in place.
So it starts with first identifying...
No, it starts with the idea.
It always starts. I was going to come to that, whether it is the idea or the genre.
Identifying the genre for this idea, So if I have an idea which I'm not sure would fit into romance, definitely. So I'm like, okay, I feel this would work better as a horror or something of that sort. So the idea comes first, and then identifying which genre it best fits in is the next step for me.
Got it.
Yeah.
And when we talk about an idea, in one of your videos, you talked about you were driving around Tannery Road. And I thought that was very intriguing.
I didn't drive. So I was going in an auto.
What would a woman growing up here be?
Not growing up. I think, I was in an auto passing by Tannery Road. And I was thinking, what if someone who... I think it's
for
very...
our audience, can you just give a visual perspective of what Tannery Road is like?
Oh God, I'm terrible at it, So at the moment, so Tannery Road, I actually have no clue how to describe it. And also right now it's going through a lot of upheaval because of the metro, I think.
Yeah.
So when I wrote Asmara's Summer, that wasn't there. It was just this wide-ish road with a lot of traffic.
It was wide.
It was, not really wide, but a lot of traffic. And that's the main road. And, there's houses inside. So definitely, the story that, kind of came into my head was, I wouldn't call myself a posh girl or anything, but I was like, imagine if I had to live here, I don't know how I would, manage. And then I kind of said, let me write a story, and then I decided to make it a young adult audience because I felt there was much more fun to be had there, much more... A lot of fun actually, and it kind of grew from there. And I realized that the book talks a lot about class without actually openly talking about it. If you read it, this girl Asmara, coming from upper middle class family who lives in a posh locality, has to spend her summer with her grandparents in Tannery Road. So, and while her parents go to Canada, and where she was supposed to go, but for last moment reasons, for some reasons, she couldn't go. And how she spends her summer there. So that book is called Asmara's Summer. And it's actually been optioned for screen by a production house called 10 Years Younger Productions. And let's see, I hope we have some good news about that soon.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
So when you think of an idea, where does the influence come from? Is it through your own environments, your own surroundings, or where does the inspiration come?
It comes from everywhere, to be honest. Sometimes I could be reading a book and, something unconnected will flow through my head and I will make a note in my phone.
You journal it.
Or write it down in my notebook. Or sometimes like this moment in in the auto. And that's happened I think that since I spoke about it once so people know. But it's happened a lot of times, especially when I'm on the road and, back in 2010, so my whole family met with a horrible road accident, highway accident actually. And I was terrified of going on the highway again. We all survived, all of us were fine. But it was that, like I was telling you earlier, until it happens to you, you never think that will happen to you. And after that accident, I was terrified of being on the highway. And we had to go on the highway because my sister was getting married that year. And we had to go. I mean, now it seems absurd that people are traveling to different cities to invite other people. But that was obviously until a couple of years ago. Even now, I think people are now coming back to it where, you would travel to another city to invite your relatives. And so this was my mother, my husband and I, three of us were going in the car. And I was sitting in the front and I was terrified, Every time we passed by something, I was like, oh God. And then to distract myself, I started thinking about a story. And I came up with the entire story of this book, my third book, My Brother's Wedding, in the car. And I was like, someone get me a laptop now, So I kind of made notes on my phone, whichever Katara phone I had back then. So made notes and came back home. And in the middle of planning and prepping my sister's wedding, I started writing my brother's wedding.
And
So-
the next aspect of storytelling, I love the way you're sort of giving examples of your books in this as we go through the concepts. One of the things I learned is the way writing is not an art that is like, inborn. You can learn writing if you learn the techniques and the process that's involved in that. And that's why I'm going into the details of some of these aspects. So we talked about the idea. You've now got an idea. The next step is about really plotting, mapping your plot, because the plot really is crucial for how you hold the whole novel or book together. How do you go about bringing that plot together? What are some things you go through?
So, like you said, writing can be taught. I used to hold workshops to teach creative writing also in 2016, 2017, and all that. Writing can be taught, but what I feel really can't be taught is telling a story. You know, some people are just better storytellers, and you can't get too technical about it. At the end of the day, if you're telling a story, and the writing is definitely the garnish, the way you present it and all that. So while that can be taught, the actual, the story, that what makes you turn the page to see what happens next. So that is not something, that I feel it's a little more instinctive. It can be, I think it can be learned, but not, I would say at a workshop, but as you keep reading, as you keep picking up things, as you start reading as a writer. But talking about plot, so plot for me, like I told in the beginning of this show, I didn't know what plot was.
When you started.
Yeah. But I think, the kind of fiction I write, which is popular fiction, which is very heavily plot based, it kind of, you eventually start learning that, plot is more or less about what makes people turn the page, what happens next. And if you don't know that, then what happens is that, you're going to lead the reader back and forth. And, there is a sense of losing yourself along with the reader's interest in the book. So I kind of like to plan my books ahead, in the sense, write down the plot, the basic skeleton, as it were. So that when someone picks up a book that I've written, they know that I know what I'm doing. I don't want them to feel that, but this person looks confused, I mean, seems very out of character. Why is this character behaving this way? So a lot of thought goes into that. So for me, plotting basically means sitting down, making a lot of notes, free form, stream of consciousness style notes in a notebook. It's basically me talking to myself, trying to, get the flow of the story, get these characters together or apart, as it were. So so for me, I hoard stationery, especially notebooks. So I've been,
I was going to ask you, is there some tool? Do you do it on a laptop or is it a book? And
the plotting, the notes, never on the laptop. It just doesn't feel right for me. In the sense, I don't get the feel of it, So I have to have a physical notebook and a pen in which I just make a lot of notes, make a lot of plans.
But you would be
I may not use them.
Sort of going everywhere, right? How do you sort of bring a structure to this whole thing?
No, I know this. I know the story. See, right now the thing is, when you're writing self-publishing, I've discovered that what really works for self-publishing is connected series, a story with those characters appear in the next book, but it's not a sequel. So another two characters, their story. So for that to be effective, you need to know the entire structure beforehand. So if you're planning a 3-book series, then you need to know who the characters are going to be in all the 3 books. You need to know where they feature. Do you bring teasers about them in the first book? Do you plant seeds in the first and second book so that it kind of, grows up in the third book? So there's a lot of planning, which is a very exciting part of writing, especially when you're self-publishing, because it's for yourself and you're the boss. You don't have to get it approved by anyone. So all that. So when, so there is an overall plan, there is a smaller plan for each book. So when I'm in the middle of a book, I'm, planning, and whatever thoughts, sometimes they come and they don't feel right to be a part of the story, actually. So I kind of write it down. And that's about it.
Taking a quick break from our conversation today, I wanted to quickly talk about our collaboration partner, Hubhopper. This podcast was created on Hubhopper Studio. If you wish to start your own podcast for free, please visit www.hubhopperstudio.com. Hubhopper is India's leading podcast creation platform. Start your podcast with Hubhopper Studio and get your voice heard across platforms like Spotify, Gaana, Google Podcasts, Wink Music, and many more. Click on the link in the episode description or visit hubhopperstudio.com. Thank you, Hubhopper, for the collaboration. And now we go back to our conversation. So when you go through this, you talked about the character building as well, right, Andaleeb? You seed some of these. There's a lot that goes into a character build-up, right from the profiling to the voice of the character, because you're also writing dialogues.
Yes.
Right? Yes. The atmosphere that the character fits into. In some ways, you're also, again, the woke part of it is involved in this whole process as well, when you're defining this character. So there's an association that the audience can make with this as well. How does that process work?
So there's a huge difference in my writing in the earlier phase of my writing as opposed to the more recent books. The earlier books were there is this misconception that people have about Muslim women being oppressed. Where because I'm in a burqa, I'm oppressed. I'm like, how? I'm doing whatever I want. It doesn't make a difference. So for me, initially, I was writing stories which would not subscribe to that, but also gave a nod to that. Okay, this is there, but my character is a rebel. Doesn't fit into that. But of late, what I've done is I've kind of just subverted it, where I'm not saying that this doesn't exist, but I'm writing about characters, about women who are going for what they want. I'm not making any of especially my women characters, I'm not making them hesitant, and, I'm not making them... of course, they have they question themselves and there's self-doubt or anything. But they are very focused on what they want in their lives, as opposed to how I was myself when I didn't know what I wanted to do. So that kind of reflected in my earlier novels. The girls I write now are much more focused. They know what they want. Whether it's job, whether it's love, they know it and they want to go for it. So the kind of subconscious message that I'm doing here is, telling girls, doesn't have to be just Muslim girls. I'm just telling girls that, always reach for what you want and not, don't hold yourself back because people tell you shouldn't or, you can't or anything. So that's something that I'm trying to make, where my heroines are assertive and, they are, of course, some of them can be pig-headed and they can, there can be egos and all that will be there. But at the same time, I kind of want to make this part especially normal for, especially for young Muslim girls who have this whole, who've been, I wouldn't say conditioned is a very strong word. I would say who've been, led to grow up said, okay, you finish your studies and then you get married, which is basically, the steps which were given to me. And I'm writing stories where the heroines have jobs, and the marriage, of course, does come into it, as it has to, or not. But so I'm kind of trying to, subtly pass this message that go get a job, go live your life. You don't have to get married immediately. And I don't know how many parents are going to come after me with a pitchfork, but it's something that I feel quite strongly about, because I never got that chance to get a job. I got married at 19.
In some ways, what you're also sort of going through your journey with your books is the journey that you've gone through your transformation as well, right? Because when you started off, there's a certain atmosphere, a thought process that you grew up with, and you've been breaking barriers throughout.
So when I started off, I think right from the beginning, from the time I was a child, I've always been, I didn't fit into the mold, which is a huge point of exasperation for my family, especially my mother. I didn't fit into the mold. But so, I think it was kind of expected that I would do unexpected things. So when my first book came out, my family, extended family, everyone just thought that I've just written about our family itself. So the thing is that, there are a few readers in my family, but there are more non-readers. So for them, the concept that I've imagined this entire story and I wrote it is a little beyond, their understanding. So they just assume that it's about the family. So now, initially, it was, I think, met with a lot of indulgence, like, this is a hobby sort of thing. Chalo, go ahead, do it, sort of. But I kind of stuck onto it, and even now I get asked, so what's the next book you're writing? I'm like, which book? You have to specify. I've written many. So I think now they've kind of figured out that
you need to catch up with me. I'm running too fast.
No, that this is an unlikely career, but it's a career nonetheless.
Yeah. So through this journey, an important part of a book is also the climax. For me, I read a lot. I hate sad endings. I read a lot of science fiction because there's a whole imaginative world. But nonetheless, and I love movies, and like I said, I especially love South Indian movies because it's more realistic in nature than a dreamy land sort of a thing. Or I like complete sci-fi sort of thing, right? It's like the extremes. But the climax is the most important part of your storytelling as well. As well as picking the right title for your book. When we were talking about some of those aspects, how does that fit into your journey of writing a story together? So,
when I wrote my first novel, for a very long time, it had the file name New Book in my computer for much longer. I think much after I'd finished writing it, for months, because I didn't know what to call it. And as for the climax for my first novel, I knew the climax in the beginning. There was one book where I knew that, but it wasn't a climax as such. It was more the setting of it. The book started with these 3 kids on a terrace. One of them is flying a kite. The book is called Kite Strings.
Correct.
And the final scene would have 2 of them, at least. Or I think, I ended up with just one of them. One of them on the terrace. No one is flying any kites. It's kind of a sad ending. Very reflective sort of mood. For me, the challenge was getting the story from there to here, and that too, they were small then, and now they're grown up. And what happened to the other characters? So that sort of took me a while to figure out.
So do you think of the climax right at the beginning, or it evolves, right?
It definitely evolves. I don't like to write my, plots like it's all kind of, fluid. It kind of moves and changes. So for me, writing the title for a very long time, I used to struggle. Even now, I still struggle coming up with the right title,
Yeah.
It's never easy. It's never easy because the title is something that attracts attention. It makes people want to pick up the book. And the climax, of course, is very important. When you're writing a romance, it's easier in the sense, definitely. So there is a set formula that you follow in a romance where, either they've met before and they got parted or something, or they're meeting for the first time and there are some obstacles. They get together, then there's a misunderstanding and then that's cleared up and then happily ever after. So that's a standard formula which everyone uses. To great success.
Do you put some spice as well into
Definitely. So I think I really shocked my initial readers, who picked up my recent romances and they were like, this is the writer of more than just biryani. How can she write about these things? We don't expect to read it. I was like, so don't read it. I can't. If I'm writing a romance, then there is an expectation that, readers have when they pick up the book. So I'm just fulfilling that expectation. So it took me a while to come to terms with that. It took me a lot of reflection, self-reflection. Do I do this? Do I, what will people say? What will my readers, my aunt say? What, who reads my books and what will they say? I was like, it's okay, they'll live with it. It's okay.
Which is why I feel like you're a true... symbolically, you truly represent the attitude makeover because it's about discovering yourself. And then because you're writing, it's also about sort of in some ways talking about it with an audience who can relate with it and make them think a little more about, why is this always done this way?
And not in an overtly way, but to bring it in a subtle way so that, it kind of, if they feel strongly about an injustice that has been done to the protagonist and, hopefully it should make them think a little more, reflect a little more about it later. But this is all not done very consciously. I mean, I do think a little more about the audience when I'm writing these days. But so it's not done very consciously, but so one of my books which came out this year, which Penguin published, it's called Mirror Mirror,
and it's for the body image and the young girls and the body image.
So it's a young adult novel about and it deals with how body shaming affects someone, how someone who has body image issues is affected by body shaming. So, when I wrote this book, I didn't set out to make it into a moralistic story or something. Just presented a story and let the readers decide for themselves. Presented the story from the point of view of a girl who is not the ideal definition of, who's not thin, so there is a lot of, in our culture, everywhere actually, there's a lot of focus on girls who are thin, who fit a certain image idea and so again, so like I was saying, so most of this is not with the view. None of my books are deliberately didactic, as in they don't set out to teach anything to anyone. If people have learned something from it, then well and good. So.
But do you set out to at least sort of poke a thought?
So, strangely enough, what I do is that, especially in my books which feature Muslim protagonists, what I've heard from readers is like, oh, but this is so normal. I'm like, but what did you expect? So like even Asmara Summer, I got that from a lot of people saying that this could be any teenager. I said, yes, that's the point I'm making, that that this, so whether I like it or not, or whether I wanted it or not, it's kind of fallen to me to be the person who normalizes Muslims in today's society, where there's a lot of rampant Islamophobia. So kind of you're either a good Muslim or a bad Muslim, and someone else decides that. So I'm writing stories where, I'm talking about normal Muslims who are just normal people like everyone else. So that's one thing that I'm trying to address in my books, but again, not very consciously, but in a very natural way.
And I've actually gone through some of your social media as well. You bring that out in the media, in the social platform as well, in terms of subtly poking to talk about some of these.
No, that's not deliberate, to be very honest.
Yeah.
It's just, trying to create a sort of publicity about the book, trying to create curiosity. And if the book deals with that, then it's easier for me to, for it to reflect in social media. So in social media also, it's mostly a reflection of myself, but it's never about telling people that you should do this. I mean, I'm nobody to tell anyone what they should do. So apart from telling people, please read my book. So that's been it mostly. I don't do it deliberately on social media. Whatever you see, it's to create awareness about my book.
In a lot of ways, you're leading the conversation for me here today. I must tell you that. One of the things you're leading me towards, and I've been always curious about, is brand building, right? Especially since we started with the style that you're involved in, which is sometimes I pick a publisher, sometimes I don't pick a publisher. I do my own self-publication. Your personal brand and how you build that, and especially considering the pace that you're going at, which I think is like making on some express train of sorts. You seem to also be a solo sort of a person, but at some time you are comfortable working with a team, but in all other cases, it is you driving the whole aspect, not just the writing, the art associated with it, the publication, the social media, the branding, they connect with the customer, book events, being there, out there. Talk to me about what are some of your learnings about personal branding, and what advice would you give for someone who's really starting around it?
I think for me, personal branding is about being real. Being real to who you are, as opposed to presenting a picture of yourself. So for me, that's worked. I don't have that big a presence on Instagram. I have a slightly bigger presence on Twitter. It's mostly to do, I've always maintained that. I also, I have to kind of consciously make time to come up with these posts, mostly because I realize that I haven't posted something and I don't want people to. I think when you get caught in the whole web of social media, you kind of also have this constant need to remind people of your existence. Otherwise, you're like, oh, they're going to forget about me. They're going to forget about my book. So there's something that you constantly want to put out and remind people. But I still feel that, at the same time, it should be real. What I feel is that I'd rather be writing my book than doing any of this. So there are times when I just do that, as opposed to, say, talking about writing on social media. I kind of prefer to just write and let my writing show for itself. I kind of retain these, anything to do with these sort of things to, among close friends, discussing things like word count and, what genre I'm writing in. I kind of prefer to stay, especially in recent times. I think in the past year or two, I've stopped talking about my writing on social media as a process. It's not been deliberate, but I just feel like, but why would anyone want to know? I mean, it's off-putting, if people want to know about my writing, they'll read my books. So I've kept the focus largely on my books. It's not that difficult. If you have a book, there are a lot of things that you can pick out from it, quotes and characters, descriptions and things, and make a very nice social media post and come up with it, So I've kind of tried to do that. I was working as the head of marketing at this software company in my last job. So the social media and the marketing bit has always been it's always been there a little bit in my blood, sort of thing. So yeah, I also enjoy doing it. I enjoy creating that overall look as such. So like before releasing a cover, before putting out a cover to like the new book that's coming out hopefully in December. So there's a sort of build up to it on social media. So those are things that some of it comes to me instinctively, some of it I should learn, but I just couldn't be bothered to. I'm like, any time spent away from the laptop is a waste of time for me, if it's doing all these things. Talking about writing instead of doing the actual writing it's very difficult for me, but I try to make time for it. So my only advice would be to stay real. Stay real and stay true to yourself. And I don't think you have to present yourself differently
than what you are.
To readers, because when readers are reading your work, they're already seeing a part of you. So they want to be able to connect to that.
So when you're going through this, in my mind, I'm actually thinking, oh my God, she's at some point, it's almost like if I take a day in Andaleeb's life and dissect it on one hand, you're thinking of a new novel or a new story or
no. It's not like that.
Let's hold on. So on one hand, you have a story you're thinking, or a character or an idea. The other hand, you've got already a book that is finished.
Oh, yes.
So you're thinking then about publisher, then the cover page and title and, where do I put it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
On the third, so it's all about your story, bringing the curiosity in your audience. Yeah. And the third is like... you've already got a book out there, so you need to, because you've got 26 books and counting, and it's like a sequence you've got going. So you've got to publish, you've got to sort of give some priority there.
Yes.
And at the same time, seed a thought for this first book that you're just starting, because it's going to come right after. How is your day? Do you like compartmentalize that?
I compartmentalize a lot. So when I'm writing a book...
So you really meant it when you said, I look at it as a job.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I compartmentalize it by time, So so like before 12 o'clock, I'll do this. After 12 o'clock, I'll be doing this. So that sort of thing. I do freelance and I do a bit of, blog writing, business blog for a client or two. So that's once a month. So when that is there, I have to make time for that. But apart from that, you're right. What you were saying. Yes, I do have. Sometimes it's not. Most of the time, it's not chaotic. It's like one book at a time. I'm dealing with it. So I'm writing this book. I'm currently writing book 2 of a series, of a 5-book series which I planned. So the first book was published last month on Amazon KDP. So that's called Accidentally Married. I was telling you about the mistake. Yeah. So I'm now writing the second book. And
you're correcting the title?
Oh, finished. I finished correcting the title. So I wrote...
So for the audience, when we were talking about this, she launched the book. It's titled Accidentally Married.
Yes.
But when she launched it with a spelling mistake, a typo. And then she went back to the newsletter, the group, the audience, to write back saying, hey, I made a blooper. I need to make this correction. There's no word like ACCO, accidentally. Accidentally. And then suddenly there was a curiosity rise.
Yes, that was very surprising, and it's not something deliberate that I can repeat for to get more interest in the next book. Definitely, I can't do that. That was an honest mistake that kind of worked out. So as I was saying, I wrote that and published that book last month. I have another book, the second book in the series, coming out next month. So while I'm writing, I also have to remind people that this book is doing well and it's doing post ratings and all that. So that's there. And I also have a book coming out next year with a publisher. So that we had a meeting yesterday, which wanted to talk to me about certain aspects. So there are times when I kind of, for me, I have to struggle to remember which story.
Yeah.
And the smaller details of it. I mean, the overall, I know which story we're talking about, but the smaller, the tinier details of it, especially if you're talking about a particular character and how that character looks or how they behave, and I'm like, I have to go back and check, let me see. So, but otherwise it's not usually that chaotic. It's quite most of it is controlled chaos. So
I almost feel like, so I've been a program manager for a long time in the company. So when you, like, for example, when you launch a printer, the printer has various parts, right? So it's got the motherboard, which comes from somewhere. On top of that, you have the software, the embedded language that talks to that motherboard. And then you have applications, and then you have, solutions sitting. And as a program manager, you need to think of each of these journeys, and one would be like a long lead, like your story is already ready, and the others are like just brewing. And then you'll have to stitch some of these like to your series. First one is gone. I need to constantly build the audience thing over there. And at the same time, I'm preparing my second series. So they're all stitched together in some ways. I feel like in some ways you've got that innate ability along with being a writer.
I don't know. I just feel that so this is not something that I recommend to others, because I don't think, I feel like I've got it and I've managed it, and this is something that I can do. I don't think, so I never recommend people to quit their jobs and just, focus on writing, because writing really, it takes a lot of discipline. Like, even if self-publishing pays, you have to write a lot. There has to be volume, higher volume. The more you write, the more money you make. And this is not for everyone. You can burn out. You can lose interest. So for me, this kind of seems to come instinctively, this whole thing, where I'm very organized on my desk, which is the only place I'm organized. I'm a mess everywhere else, So, I mean, if you give my desk to me and I'm sitting over there, everything else can go, fall around me in shambles. But as long as I have my laptop and my desk, then I'm very,
That's like your sanctum.
Yes. So for me, writing is, it's kind of isolated, but also a chance for me to enter a different world and, create characters, populate that world with characters, play God, as it were, and decide the fates of these characters. And it's addictive. So I kind of think of writing as an addiction. So definitely it's an addiction.
Yeah.
Because I don't think... So I think it's a positive addiction if there's something of that sort. Yeah. I mean, or, it could have gone the other way. I could have been addicted to something really bad. So, I also do have a tendency to try and be as productive as I can. So all that kind of comes together and it kind of works.
So when we started the conversation, Andaleeb, and you sort of maneuvered through it in this conversation as well, you are a very ambitious person by nature. Then you went through passion versus money. You sort of figured,
I do want the money. I'm not
right.
I'm not denying that. I
right,
definitely
and
want the money.
You sort of found a model that works now. Writers and the journey of a writer to the outside world, like me, is portrayed as a very sexy thing. Talk to me about the money aspect. Is it a comfortable living? It's a luxurious living? Is money coming? Does money eventually come?
So, like I was saying, I never tell anyone to quit their job if they want to become a writer. Never quit your job, because unless you're already rich. So, writing full time is a privilege. You have to have a certain amount of privilege where you're not worrying about how you're going to pay the bills if you want to be a full-time writer, or someone else should be backing you, maybe a spouse, someone who's working and taking care of these things. If not, writing can't be a full-time job. It has to, because it doesn't pay. Traditional publishing works on a model which definitely it's a sort of an indulgent. It's almost like pocket money. So the very fact that you're being published by a big publisher, and I'm like, I'll pay you to publish my books, but of course no. So the first advice I tell people is, you don't pay a publisher to publish your books. The idea that people have, as you suggested, you have this idea of being a sexy profession. It is the most dullest profession, because we want to not be disturbed, and we want to be left alone, and preferably if we don't have to step away from the desk to eat or whatever, just continue writing. So there's nothing sexy about it. It's very boring and mind-numbing, except for the writer. I mean, watching someone create should be interesting.
Like interesting to be a god, but to be a character in the god story.
If you were an artist and you were watching someone paint, now that would be fascinating. But there's nothing fascinating about watching someone write, because mostly it's you hunched over the laptop and in whatever clothes you were wearing yesterday or today, and it's mostly you talking to yourself, sounding a bit batty, and trying to understand how this works. And I can't write when someone's watching me. I get very not self-conscious. I'm like, don't look here, just let me be myself. So I definitely cannot write in a coffee shop or anything. I'm digressing, I don't know. So I was
the money.
Yeah, the money. So self-publishing does pay, but it doesn't pay enough. It doesn't pay enough. It can't be the only source of your income, because you need to bring out a lot. You need to bring out many books for self-publishing to be viable. And that's not just
when
possible.
You say bring out many books, what is it? Like 3 books a year?
No,
5 books a
1
year?
book a month.
Oh.
Yeah.
So 12 books a year.
Yeah, and even then it may not be financially viable, because what happens is that not all books work the same way. So, some books readers just immediately love. And I think after a certain point, you've saturated the audience. So whoever has to read it would have read it. And beyond that, where are you going to get the audience? How is the money going to come if at least a huge section of people have read it? Also, self-publishing is confined to ebooks, which is something that people are just about becoming comfortable with. There are a lot of old school people who don't like to read on devices. There's also the misconception that if I've published on Amazon, that means you have to have a Kindle to read. And I'm like, no, you don't need a Kindle. Just a phone or a tablet and download the Kindle app. So you have to fight with all these misconceptions. It's already a very small crowd of readers, because it's only ebook readers. And among them, the choices are huge. So how does your book stand out? Why would anyone want to read your book? Even if they've subscribed to Kindle Unlimited, they know it's free. For me, I think what worked was because I already had an audience. I already had people who read my books, who wanted to read more by me. So for me, it kind of worked. But for a new writer, why would anyone want to,
So what you're also saying is, if you do venture into it, and if you do venture into the self-publication, start building a list of your audience.
Start building a list of your audience, and also start building a list of your books. As in, if you have the ability to write, like there are some people who write one book and they're like, I'm done. This is it. Then you can't make money on self-publishing. But if you can think of it as a business, as something that as a service you're providing. See, Kindle, Amazon also recently launched something called Kindle Vella, I think, which is not available in India yet. As in, we can't set it up, which is a serialized story. So, so that also is something they're exploring for readers and for writers. So I wonder, I'm not sure how it's going to work here in India, but this already has picked up where, where our biggest income comes from Kindle Unlimited subscribers, not from sales. Not many people buy the book, so sales would be like a small number, but the number of people who borrow the book and read it is much higher, which is where the money comes. Another thing I've noticed is that people tend to borrow fiction, but if you've written and self-published non-fiction, then they will buy it, because non-fiction always has that idea that this is useful. And fiction is more whimsical. It's, you read it, then you can return it. But if you've written a book that makes a reader want to keep that book with them, then they might borrow it, read it, and then they might even buy it. I've had that happen to me. I've had readers telling me that we read it on Kindle Unlimited, but we loved it so much, so we bought it for ourselves. So it's all, everything is a learning process here. There is no fixed rule. There is no fixed formula that if you do this much, then you'll make this much. But the one thing that you do know is that you have to write a lot and publish a lot to make money, to be known. You have to become known within the readers who read. There's a set number of readers who consume. I would have to say the word consume, no matter how much I hate it, in regards to reading, because for them, they consume these romances. So for them, but then also not fit into any sort of mold, which is already out there. And there are many molds out there in the world of independent self-publishing. There are a lot of molds. I try to stay away from all of that. So to stay away, so it's all a work in progress. It's a huge learning curve.
So one of the things I observed also is, in addition to all this day in Andaleeb's life, you also need to be aware of what's happening in the world of reading. What are some trends? Like, to your point, Amazon's launched in Kindle the Amazon new
Kindle
Vella, right? So you need to be aware of that and also try to see thereby what is my model for the book.
Yeah. I think not so much as, I think if there isn't really much in that aspect. I would say what I do try to do more is, I do read a lot of books in similar genres myself, to see what they're doing and what I could do, and maybe could I do it better, so that sort of thing. Especially because when you're looking at romances, especially, it's very trope dependent. There are tropes that you follow. So like falling in love at first sight or some. So there are actual tropes which people follow, and which makes it easy for the reader to identify when you say outright. So these were things I didn't know when I started. So readers wouldn't know exactly what they were getting into. But if I identify the trope in the beginning, in the title itself, which actually makes me feel a bit cringe, because it doesn't sound like something, a book should be called. But you try and identify the trope in the title and the readers will lap it up. Like the last book which I published, Accidentally Married, has a subtitle called An Enemies to Lovers Romance, which kind of gives the plot, which tells people, oh, okay. And there are people who love certain tropes. They're like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. I'm going to read it, So those are certain things that you've picked up along the way. And I don't know what you asked. I'm sorry. I digress too much.
No. I think being aware of what are some of the trends that are happening out there.
Yes.
So
trends wise, there isn't much happening apart from there isn't really much happening. but I think if you're on social media long enough, you kind of you figure out stuff, things, you see what other writers are doing. I try not to think too much about what other writers are doing. I prefer to write within my own bubble. When I'm writing, I kind of put myself in this thing where I'm not going to be worried that this book is not going to be as good as, say, if some famous author wrote it. Because writers are filled with self-doubt all the time. So letting that self-doubt into this, and like, oh my god, if I write this, people are going to laugh at me. So the moment you start thinking negative thoughts, it's very easy to kind of bring a halt to the actual process. So all that said and done, apart from that, it's not so much, like I told you, any time spent away from the laptop feels like a waste for me. So I try to stay focused.
So my last question, what is North Star for you?
I'm sorry?
What's like the ultimate? When has Andaleeb arrived?
Okay. So I have a couple of writer friends who also self-publish. So, their names are Shilpa Suraj and Apeksha Rao and all that. And we kind of keep talking about these things. And, we recently thought that, I think, when our books, we were just, in fact, yesterday discussing this. Someone gave my book 2 stars, a 2-star rating. Someone gave Shilpa's book a 1-star rating. And we were like, you've arrived. Someone hates you enough that your good book is getting a 2-star rating, 1-star rating. But for me personally, I mean, obviously, this is not something I aspire to. I think what I aspire to is having happy readers. One of the things that I do aspire to would sound awfully egotistical. So I will not say that.
No, I want to hear that. I want to hear that.
Oh God, it's this is very silly, but I think I would have arrived when my name is bigger than the book's title name in a traditionally published book, not self-published, because that I only can do it, but I don't have the thing. But if my name is enough to sell the book, and the publishers put my name big and the title of the book is like okay hai kuch,
it really talks about that ambition. I love this. This is the ultimate culmination of our conversation, is it?
Yeah,
because I think it really talks about what?
And I know, and I'm like thinking, but my name is already big enough, so how are they going to fit my name, in big?
They probably make it, I mean, even that's with me, right? Saujanya Shetty is so long, you have to shrink the size to fit into a frame.
Yeah, so, and I'm like, I want my name big. I want my name bigger than the title of the book. It's not going to happen, but this is something that I can always dream about eventually. So, because when you start out, your name is really small. My name, is really small somewhere at the bottom of the cover.
Right.
It kind of is increasing in small points. I'm like, when is my name going to be splashed on the book? And the name of the book is going to be like an afterthought,
You have to search for it.
Extremely egotistical of me.
No, it's good to have an aspiration and North Star. It's always important to have that, because you strive towards something, a goal.
I mean, I'm not actually striving towards it. I'm just hoping for it to happen.
Yeah. But thank you so much, Andaleeb. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Thank you so much for calling me. It was a pleasure.
It was indeed a pleasure here as well. So thank you. Thank you.